Hi everyone. Just gonna do a camera check. Okay, we're good to go. How's everybody doing tonight? I got a charm pack, set of charm packs in my inventory, so I thought I would, they were very summer springy looking, so I thought we'd do something with them. So I've got this to remind me what the name of the collection is, and my various other tools. I even brought the cutting machine, the Gemini, up so you could actually see it go through. I know that's pretty exciting, isn't it? Got my fabric cutting plates. I brought the smaller one up, but I was having technical difficulties, so at the last minute I had to switch them. So I'm a little squeezed between them because the machine's right here, sewing machine's right here. But you know, I'm always turning and you can't see the mystery of where I'm cutting, so I had promised that I would one time show it. So see, I actually remembered to do that. That's pretty exciting in itself. Oh, yeah, that's me dropping a plate. Okay, let's see what time it is. So we got another couple minutes. If anyone has this Gemini die set, Dresden, I always look down here, I think that's the name, but it's up here. So it's called the Dresden Plate. They've got Dresden, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sizes. Or you can also buy, and I've talked a little bit about this before, excuse me, that you can get templates, acrylic templates for a lot of shape. So this isn't exactly the Dresden plate one, but it actually could be used for it. But it would look something like this. And then you would move it on your fabric to whatever length you wanted. And you'll notice that the end shouldn't be a point. And sometimes coming up a little further is even better. So they do make acrylic templates, and the acrylic templates are made so you can run your rotary cutter. So if I was doing this on the rotary cutter, I would cut both sides, but the next time I would turn this way, and then just cut here, and then turn. So I would have a strip of fabric, if I was using a strip of fabric, that I could keep turning. You just have to be careful if it's directional. So I'll go over that one more time in a couple minutes. I think I got all my tools. Let's check the camera one more time. Yep, bro. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot with the guide on. And I'm using my little machine so I don't have pivot, so I'll be all crabby. So we'll just give it 1 minute more. Okay, so excuse me. Let me get a sound like I got a frog in my throat. Okay. So again, hi everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? It's raining, a little bit rainy here, just a little bit. So I got a charm pack, and a charm pack is a package of 5-inch squares. And generally, they're from a collection of fabrics, unless sometimes the store will put their own together. But if you have a strip around it with a manufacturer's name, it's from a collection, and they give you some of everything in the collection. So usually there's about 42 squares, and they'll tell you on the back. Once in a while they do half packs, so it would be like 21, and then you'd have to get 2 packs. In this case, it's 42. There are some duplicates, and that's fine. And I'm using the Gemini die set Dresden, and it's from the patchwork dies. And I'm using the second size. So smallest, next, and next. Look, I think that's how it goes. Let me double check. Yes. So this fits perfectly, the one that goes here, fits perfectly on these 5-inch squares. So let me just get that out of the way, put that over there. And lost it already. If you don't have some kind of die set, you can get Dresden Plate rulers, and you can see how it comes on the angle, and I just explained this a few minutes ago, but I'm going to do it again. And depending on what width fabric you have, where your ruler would end. So it's a lot of sizes, up to 8 inches on this one. So you would cut your fabric to fit whatever size you want to do on here. And when you cut it, first cut one this way, so you're cutting along here, then turn it. So you're always, and once you get past your first one, you're just cutting on one side and turn it and turn it. Just be careful if you have directional fabric, if it makes a difference. You just have to see. A lot of times it doesn't make a difference, because a Dresden plate goes around in a circle, so most of the time the direction wouldn't matter. So let me set that aside, put that out of the way. Got my iron going. So this little collection is from Moda, and it's called Sunday Picnic. So I saved that for you so I wouldn't forget to tell you. And in this case, I already know that it's going to take 11 blades, they call them, 11 of these to make a half a circle. Is that right? Yes. So, and for every square, let me iron this one. For every square, you're going to get 2 blades out of it. So if you have 11, if you take 11 fabrics, you'll have enough to do a whole circle. So so this comes with 42 squares, and you need 11 for each. So you just got to add 2 squares, and you can add, like this particular one came with some white on white. So you can add the white on white. And next week I'm going to show you what I turn these into for a project. And I'm going to have a white background, but I'm okay having a white one because there's going to be stitching between the blade and the background. So if you need to fill it in with something, you only need 2 more. Just check the back of the pack. If you're using the pack, just check the back of the pack. But like I said, normally there's 42. As a rule, there's 42. Okay, so I did have these divided up, and then I messed around with them. So let's see. And I just went through the pile and just divided up kind of by the colors, so that I don't have 2 the same. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I don't want to have. Oh, I'm going to put the. Okay, I got to count that again. Isn't that terrible? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'll put a white one in, 11. So I'm going to go ahead and set the rest of these aside. Okay, so I've got 11 5-inch squares. That's enough to make a whole Dresden plate. So what I'm going to do is, and this is going to be really, really easy. So I got my fabric plate, so I got a clear plate and my fabric plate A, and I'm just going to take some of these and fold them in half. And I'm just going to do a little finger press. I don't need to put a permanent crease in, but if you feel better doing that. And I'm going to put these on an angle. So I'm going to start them this way. And I'm lining up my fold side. And it doesn't matter. I'm not worried about what order that I'm going to sew them in yet. I just want to line them up. 3. I guess I better stand over this one. So I'm not going to worry so much about this side. I want to be as close as I can because I don't have a lot of wiggle room. So what have I got there? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I did them right sides together, but it doesn't matter. 5. All right. Now you're gonna have to help me out here. I've lost my template. How could that be possible? Oh, is it in my? Because it's inside of the ones I put aside. You were probably yelling at me about that. So I want to make sure I have my blade, my cutting part face down. And I'll get a little closer in a second. And I'm just going to tape that so you can see it's close, but it's not that close. So I can cut a little closer to this folded edge because I know I lined them up rather than this one. And I'm just going to put my B fabric plate and my other clear plate. And turn down your sound. It might be louder than you want to hear. So 5 was a lot. Maybe you'll do, maybe next time you do 4. It made it, but I could hear it. Oh, I got one with a thread caught. So yeah, I would do 4 because I didn't have any issue with 4, and I just got one that I can feel. It's just a thread there, or 2 threads. It looks like. Yeah, see, I just have some little. Can you see the little threads? And you don't want to pull those. Oh, I've got one side that didn't cut, so I'm going to see if I'm going to put this one on top when I cut again. So this time I'll do 3, and I'll add this one on for the 4th one. And I'm just going to. I was on this angle last time. I'm going to come over there. You don't want to keep cutting in the same exact spot. And let's just see if I can get that white one, because it's partway cut. So I'm going to go ahead and line up the fold the same as I did before. And I just used, there was a little indent there. I just used that to go by. So anyone that's been cutting fabric with the Gemini before the fabric plates come out, you can really see the difference between fighting to get that sandwich, and it really is nice. Okay, so my white one is fine. And you don't have much waste. And I'm just going to do the last 3. So if you think about cutting out 22 blades, that's pretty fast. I think I would probably just take my whole charm pack and just get them all cut and then arrange the order of colors and so forth. Then you can clear away, have more room. But if you like to do cut some, sew some, cut some, sew some, that's perfectly fine. Oh. I'm trying to rush, and it actually ends up taking me longer when I rush than if I hadn't. Isn't that always the way? Okay, so remember A, clear plate A, B, clear plate. So let me get the plates out of the way. And see that one, those cut perfectly fine. And put my die over there, so I had a panic there a minute, I couldn't find it. And now I'm just going to divide these because remember I have pairs. So I'm just going to make 2 piles. And I cut some earlier because I'm going to do it so every blade is different. So this would make a whole blade, but I'm going to take the colors into 2 piles and put 1 pile with a pile from another group. You'll see in a minute. And that way, and I want to look at this white to make sure it's right side up, so I don't have to worry about that later. So it's pretty light, so it's hard. You might never notice. So we're going to work with Microtex 7010 needle, regular sewing thread, and I moved my stitch length down to 1.8, which is like 1 notch below 2.0. And I want a little closer stitching because I'm only going to be stitching maybe 1.5 inches. And so I want my stitching a little closer together so it doesn't come undone as easy. So these piles match. So I'm going to take 1 pile and I'm going to put it with my next group. And then I have another pile so from each group of 11, you get 2 piles. And so just swap your piles with each other if you want your Dresden to be totally, every blade a different color. And if you don't care, then that's fine too, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do is fine. So I actually have this one already sewn. So I'm going to set that aside. And I still don't need to know what order I'm going to have them in, because I've got to make the blades first. So there's no sense in arranging them, 2 or 3 times. So, but in this case, well, no, because I got 11 of them, so we're good. I was thinking in this case I have to, but there's only because I have one of the piles, not both of them. I'm getting myself confused. I hope I'm not getting you confused. Okay, so what I did was I cut 11 squares, folded in half, gave me 22 blades. That's enough to make one full circle of blades. Then, so that I have different fabrics for every blade, I took one pile from one set of 11 and swapped it with one pile of another set of 11. Does that make sense? Okay? So I'm going to show you, this is what we're aiming for. Isn't that pretty? So that's half the circle. So does that make more sense that when you see it? I'll even face it towards you. So we've got to make the blades first and then put the blades together. Okay? So I'm going to switch to the sewing machine, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to fold them right sides together, and we're going to work on the, we're going to be sewing on the long side, not this short side. So I'm going to fold it in half, and what I want to do is I want to start feeding the fold side into the machine first. If you have a machine that does a straight up and down locking stitch, you want to engage that and lock that, because we're going to be fiddling around with this end, and so you want to lock it. If you have to do 3 forward, 3 back, that's okay too, but a lot of machines have the lock in place. I have a baby lock, and I'm right now I'm working on the Verve, which is a little tiny machine, so it's in the, in the fairly inexpensive category. If you look on your, let me see if I can move the camera. So let me move the camera before I go over there so you can see. So there. So I'm going to show you my screen. And you'll either have it on your screen, or sometimes you'll have it, your stitches will be in the flip up lid of your machine. So there we go. So what can I point with that I won't be getting into trouble here? Okay, so if we look at this, let me come in a little bit more. There we go. Oh, there we go. It doesn't want to stay over there. There we go. So if you look here, 103 and 104. They're both the straight stitch, and they're both stitching in the middle. Oh, my pen's throwing off the, there we go. I'll stay out of the way with my pen. They're both a straight stitch in the middle. But if you look at the top right here, and I'll move the pen again, you'll see that one has 2 lines and the other one has a dot. And somewhere on your machine, it might be not be on the screen, it might be down here on this part of your machine, you'll have these 2 icons. So if you push both of those and you pick, for example, the 1-03, when it starts, it'll go 3 forward and 3 back. Then you get to the end and you'll push the reverse button on your machine just once, and it'll go 3 back and 3 forward and cut. Sometimes you might not have a cut, but you would have those 2 options. The next one, this one, the 1-04 with the dot at the top, when you have these buttons engaged, it's going to stitch in place 3 times and then go. But I think at the end, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't use it a lot, I think at the end, when you push your reverse button, instead of doing stitch in place, I think it goes 3 forward and 3 back, 3 back and 3 forward, and then cuts. Not positive, but we don't care so much about that end as we do the beginning. And we can't chain piece. We can't do one right after the other, because in order for the locking to work, you have to cut in between each blade. So the machine knows that it's going to do a lock next. Hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so I'm gonna move the, I'm gonna go back to the desktop, the work table, just so that you're not getting dizzy with me adjusting the camera back to the sewing. Let's see. Okay, so we're back to the sewing. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our blade, fold it right sides together. Remember, this is the wider end, okay? We're going to fold it in half, right sides together, and we want to turn it so that we're working with the fold first. And the reason I want to do the fold first is because I want that locking stitch there more than I care about it being here. But I can't just chain to the next one because I need the locking stitch at the beginning of the next one. And you'll see as I'm going along what I'm talking about. So I want to make sure that I have fabric under my needle. And remember, I'm on a 1.8 stitch length. So it's going to stitch in place and then go. And I'm going to get to the end. And I might leave that there and not worry about it, but I have to cut my thread for the machine to know it's going to, I want another locking stitch. And when I pick up, when I pick up the, I should have my other machine that I can hit the button. I'm trying to, so when I put my foot up to put one down, I can just slide the other one out. Is what I was trying to do. And I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to just move the camera so that I can put my other hand over this side. So I'm folding it in half, the fold facing towards the machine. I got to cut my thread. I'm going to lift my foot up. I can just push that other blade out of the way, get the next one going. All right, I'm going to cut my thread. And I'm going to keep doing the exact same thing. So this is kind of a case of like do all one process at once, or like take, do the sewing for one set of the Dresden Plate blades. Oh, I keep forgetting to cut. I'm not used to using the stitch in place at the beginning. I have on my other machine I have a button for it, so when it stitches in place and doesn't move, I panic and think it's stuck. Oh, see? Because it takes 3 stitches and the fabric's not going anywhere, and it's like, oh my God, have I got it all stuck? Now my my frogs, can you see them? They're going to be upside down, but it's okay. Because it depends where you look on the Dresden plate, whether it'll be upside down or right side up. So I don't think I'd worry about it unless it's something that's really obvious or it bothers you. If it bothers you, don't fight it. If it bothers you, make it right. So I thought tonight I would just make the fans, or make the plate, and then next week I'll show you what to do with the plate. So if you're interested, you could do your blades, you know, before next Thursday. If you're not sewing along tonight. So you can see that it doesn't take long to sew those blades at the top. And this is, I always think of this as like, it's like magic. It's like, how do you get that point at the top? I don't get that. But you'll see in a second. Okay, so we're all done the sewing for the moment. So let me switch back to the work table. And let me bring all those pieces over. Did I get everybody? I think so. And I have a couple where maybe I didn't hit my, it's just the tail of the thread, because I kept them so close together. Okay, there we go. So we've got our pile. The first thing we're going to do, and let me zoom in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is on the fold side, we're going to clip at an angle, and let me just clip it. And let's see if I can get it to, come on, be a good person and focus. I'm trying to see what it, oh, there we go. So here's my stitching. I don't want to go to my stitching. I'm just above my stitching, but I'm just taking out that extra fabric. And that's only on the fold side. Oh. And don't move your fabric when you're cutting like I just did. I had to pull it closer so I could see it. Oh, let me back up because now you can't see what I'm doing. Oh, wrong way, sorry, very sorry. Okay. So I'm just clipping each of these on the fold side. If you have your stitching and it didn't go to the very end, that's okay. You can be off a little bit, it'll be okay. And that's what I was talking about, got a lot of thread here, about doing one step at a time. So you sew a bunch, then you trim them all. So it's like a few little steps. Hope I did that one already. Okay, let's get all these little pieces out of our way. Okay, so the next step, and let me come back in again. Here we go. The next step is I want to, and we're still inside out, we're still on the side where we sewed. I just want to open this a little bit because I'm going to just open that little bitty seam allowance. And it might be easier if you set it down or hold it, it's up to you. But I'm just gonna finger press that open. Okay, so you can see, now you can see where I clipped. And see how where I clipped kind of runs along these edges. It doesn't stick out past the little triangle. Does that make sense? See? It doesn't have to be perfect. So you could be sitting watching your favorite show, doing. Let me see. If we have 44, that makes 88 blades. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? The bigger the blades that you cut, so if you use that other ruler, if you used a bigger die, the less amount of blades you need to make a circle. And I can't tell you offhand how many it takes of what size. You just have to sew some together and see. But the bigger it is, oh, so I didn't cut that quite close enough to the stitching. They got a lot of threads here. So it didn't open and lay, and the little seam didn't lay flat. And if that happens to you, you'll immediately see it and you'll know what it is. So this is pretty easy so far. It's kind of relaxing. This is one of those projects that you could make a few here and there between a big project and just throw them in your little bucket of some sort. And then, oh, I did it again. So let me see if I can show you. I didn't cut close enough on when I trimmed the corner. I'm too high up. So when I open this, let me see if I can get it open. Can you see right here? See how I can't get it flat? And that's just, I just need to take off just a tad more. And now when I open it, it'll lay nice and flat. So we'll just keep going. Almost done. Make sure I stay in the camera. I keep forgetting it's zoomed up closer. And I'm just finger pressing it. We will take it to the iron in a minute. Or in this case, we'll bring the iron to them. If you have, let me see if I can get this one open. So if you have at this end, say a stitch or two come undone, don't worry about it because that's going to be inside. We just want to make sure the fold end stays nice and sewn, and that's why we did the locking stitch at the beginning. So let me back this up. About right there. So I've got my pile done. I'm going to bring my iron up. And I'm going to move it over a little bit so I don't set anything on fire, including myself. I'm just going to turn now I'm going to turn that end, like the little teepee, right side out, and just put my point turner in there gently. And what I want to do, let me come in again, and let me move so I just don't want to put my iron next to my Gemini there. What I want to do is make sure, so hold on one second, let me move the Gemini out of the way so that I can come in closer. There, how's that? So I turned it right side out now, and my goal is to have that seam line in the middle of that triangle. And let me get this, because I know we're on the angle there on the video. Let me get this, and I'm just pressing that. Oh, which way am I going? This way. So here's the seam. So I want it running down the middle equally, and that's the only precision you have to have. So let me just flip these all right side out, and for the moment I just put my my finger up in the little teepee part. I don't know why I think it's a teepee, but in the triangle part. And then I'll use my point turner to get it the rest of the way. Nobody's chatting tonight, so I must be sewing alone tonight. That's okay. You can always watch it later. Okay, so I've turned them all. I call it right side out, so that now here's your good side and here's your good side, and this is your inside. And I'm just gonna poke that end out. Don't get carried away poking it and poke your way right through. Just take it easy. And you see how I'm doing each step on all of them instead of doing one whole blade. Now, when I first do anything, I would do, cut the blades, sew one blade, turn it right side out, and get it all situated. So I know I'm not doing anything wrong. But after that, I would just do each step to all the blades. But you can do it whichever way works for you. Some days you may want to do it one way, and another day you might want to do it a different way. And that's okay. We can do that. That's the nice part of things. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just take each one and iron it. So when I flatten it out, let me come over here a little bit. When I flatten it out, I have to stand up so I can be over it when I'm showing it this way. When I flatten that down, that seam is going to be, I'm aiming for that seam to be in the middle. And you kind of, when you press open that seam with your fingers, you're almost getting it lined up for yourself already. But you notice I'm not ironing, I'm just pressing it down. It's an easy kind of job to do, don't you think? Oop. That one was a little rascal. He was trying to go to one side. And all I did was touch this corner to pull it over a little more. So it was going to your left. I just, on the right side, just pulled that corner, just touched it. Whoop. Okay? So we can turn them over and give them another press. Oh, I know I'm reaching my arm in front of you. I feel like when someone, when you learned as a kid not to reach across the table in front of someone, that's what I feel like I'm doing. Okay? So let me back this up again. And just stop for a second to see if anybody has any questions. So now I'm going to lay them out how I'd like them to be. Let me move all that out of the way. We don't need that. So because I have the first half done, I need to pay attention to what fabric is going next to these ends. So I know I have some lights or white background and light. So I'm trying to intersperse those. And they're going to take up a little more room because they don't have a seam on them yet. So let's see. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got to fit this little guy in. I guess I'll put him right here. How's that? Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew them in pairs. Okay? So I'm going to pick them up in pairs, sew a pair and then put it back, sew a pair, put it back, and so forth. Because we don't want to like start at one end and sew all the way around. Because halfway through it gets to be too much fabric. So we sew it in pairs first. Now I have 11, so I'm going to have a trio at some point. I was going to say a pair of 3. A trio at some point. Okay? So I'm going to switch over to the sewing machine. And I'm going to work on the pairs, and I'll just be putting them back as I sew, but it probably would drive you crazy if I cameraed back and forth just so you can see me set the pair down. Hi, Rhonda. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I love this fabric. It's just so, I don't know, I call it makes you smile fabric. I like that. So let me switch to the sewing side. And all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be picking up a pair, and let me put this camera back a little bit. There we go. That'll help. So I've got my pair, and I brought them over just as they were. So this was the first one, this was the second one. I want to flip them over, and the important part to line up is up at this triangle end, not down the bottom. So see, let me line this one up. And yeah, we don't need any pins. Come on, it's only 2 inches of fabric. So the important part is to line them up where the points are. So here's my points. I'm lining them up. I'm up by that fold. If they don't line up exactly at the bottom, it's okay. I'll show you when because I'm sure I'll get one. Because this bottom is eventually going to be covered. So we don't have to be all exact. So we want to be more exact up here. We're still going to use that 1.8, and we're still going to lock at the beginning. Okay? So the important thing to remember is lining these 2 folds up and making sure it's lined up here. When we get started. We're still using our 1/4 inch foot. And I know I got my arm in your way again. So, let's see. Trying to decide how I can, I turned the light down on this. Let me see if I should turn the light back up. I turned the light down because it's glaring, and the next minute I need it up higher. Let's see. Buzzer. Opening screen. Light. This one, the light's either off or on. There's no in between on that. Okay, so if I put the light on anymore, it tends to glare to you. So hopefully you can see it enough. So I'm just going to get it started, and remember it's going to stitch in place. I have it set to stitch in place. And before I get to the end, I'm just going to check to make sure that the fabrics are lined up along the right side. And they don't have to meet on the bottom. If they meet, wonderful. But if they're off like, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch or so, I think it would be, that's okay. So I'm just going to take those 2, And I'm going to show you what I did wrong. So we may have to get the pin out. So we're going to go back to the table. Here I just got through telling you no pins. But when I sewed these together, remember my purple was on the left and this light one was on the right. Well, guess what? They're opposite. Oh no, they're not. Phew, scared myself. Turn it around, Lorene. There we go. Okay? But you could do that because once you have these together, who knows which side you're going to go on. So let's do our pin that shows where we're going to sew. But before I set this down, I'm just going to press this or finger press this seam open. Okay? So now here's my next two. I'm going to flip them right sides together, and we're going to use our old pin on the side we're going to sew on. Okay, so remember, while we're right here, we might as well go ahead and line up the two folds here and along here. This might not be perfect lined up here. We want it lined up along this whole side though. And because what's going to happen is, so I put the pin in, so I know now that's the side I'm going to sew on. Because when I go to the sewing machine, I need to start here. So I'm going to have to flip this over. So now I'm folding from the other side. Oh, here's a good example. Can you see the little bit of orange? See that little bit of orange? So my orange one is just a tad longer than my pink one, and that's okay. That just means I was a little different in my seam allowance, and that's okay. I mean, you don't want to be like an inch difference, but you're gonna be about, you can see it. You're gonna be about that little difference, and that's okay. That's fine. Just if it's off here, make sure you double check that your two folds are lined up together, okay? So now I'll switch back and I'll stay switched over. So once I get my fabric down, once I get my fabric down and I take a couple stitches, my pin's over on the right, that's where it's supposed to be. And I take a couple stitches, then I can go ahead, I move the camera so now I can't get my arm around it. There we go. I'm trying to get my arm over this way. I'm going to go ahead and take that pin out. But I'm also going to make sure that I'm lined up along here. And you can see my little orange fabric sticking out there. Okay, so to make this a little faster, I'm going to just plop those down without doing that finger press. Grab the next two. I mean, I could flip back and forth, but you'd probably get really tired of that. Make sure my pin's in the side that I'm going to sew, because generally I have to flip it over to be on the right side. Make sure my folds are lined up. Take a couple stitches. Remember, it's locking in place at the beginning. We want that. And again, you know I always hang on to my fabric until it's all done stitching. Oh, keep forgetting I don't have pivot. I'm just grabbing my next two, folding them on top of each other, putting that pin in on the side that I need to sew on. So here I am, making sure these are lined up, and see, you can see, not lined up, but my pin's on the right side, so I can take my pin out because I'm in sewing position. It's like being in the airport and your plane is in takeoff position. And I'm just gonna Get a couple stitches in there. Trying to keep my arm out of your way. And I have my needle down position. So even though this machine doesn't have pivot, it does have needle down. And I'm going to guess that every machine, right down to the lowest priced, it has to be the electronic one, has the needle down button. So you know I refer to that, that's my third hand, because that's holding the fabric for me. So I just lined up the rest of the fabric. Okay, so I'm just putting it down in the spot where it was before. And when I go back to the work table, when we go back to the work table, you're going to see why I pressed the seam allowance open on the first one, and and pressed it open as we went. You'll see why. Okay, so I got my pin in. I'm going to flip the fabric over because I need to start at the fold side. So I want to make sure my folds are nice and lined up. Get those first few stitches, holding my fabric, take the pin out, making sure it's lined up along that side. The Dresden plate, I find it's pretty easy sewing, and if you're doing big blades, it's even, it's even easier. So this pair is going to become the trio. So I'm adding the last one onto that pair I just did, and I'll show you in a second here. I want to get my pin in. So here's the pair I just did. Here's the pair I just did, and we don't want this guy to be lonely all by himself. So they've now become a trio. Oh, and I've got to take my pin out because I'm not lined up. But I know if I'm right here, I'm at my sewing machine and I'm lined up to sew, I should be able to take my pin out and not get into too much trouble. Should. Okay, so I'm going to take my little pin with me. And let's go back to the work table. And so here's the one I did just a little finger press of this, excuse me, pressing the seam open. So you see how it lays flat like it's supposed to. And these that I put down, because I didn't finger press, they're all folded up. That was the only difference. So I like to finger press them open as I go in case I want to change any colors, because I can't really see what color's next to what when they're folded up. Because you'll be surprised, sometimes you just change your mind. And when you're lining up your colors, let's see, I'll give you a long time. You got 15 minutes to get your half circle in the colors that you want. If you want to do your whole, well, let's say, I'll give you 5 minutes for a half circle, but I'll give you 15 if you line up the whole circle. How's that? And of course, I'm not there, so you can do anything you want. But you should time limit yourself, because you could be half the day. Sometimes when you move one, it causes you to move, like 5 more. And I know some people, like, they take pictures, but I'd rather just get them right and just sew and put them back and sew and put them back. It's sort of, it's like a little methodical thing. Now I will say, see how I've got the green and the white, and look what I've done again, the green and the white. Now, and except this has frogs on it, but still. That might annoy me. I don't know why. Oh, now I got frogs with frogs. Let's see what I can do about that. See, I wasn't paying any attention. And you know, once you have this all together, it's not going to matter. So I'm not going to say, okay, I got a frog here and I got to put the other one up there. You can. You could just take a seam, take one out and put another one in. You can. So if you do have something that really is bothering you, go ahead and fix it. You've seen in some of my past videos where I, take things apart. So if I don't want this frog next to this one, I could move it here. But then I don't want these two purples across from each other. So I could do it this way. But then I have these two going across from each other. Do you see the little things that can go on? So you're better off most of the time just to leave something, just leave it alone. How's that? Just leave it alone. You know what I'm saying? Because you could drive yourself crazy. Okay? So now I'm going to take the pairs and stitch those together. So I'm going to take this pair and this pair, stitch them together. Then I'll stitch this one, and then I'll stitch this one. Okay? This one and this one. I can't find another word for that. I could call them section 1, section 2, section 3, but I wouldn't remember which one was which. So we did our pairs, and because we have 11, we have a trio. And it doesn't matter where the trio is. It doesn't have to be on the end. Doesn't matter. I'm going to now flip my pairs. And again, I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to pin them all because inevitably for me, I'll get them out of order. I'm just going to turn this over. And this time, instead of watching me sew, you can watch the table. And then you can look and see what colors you might want different. Let me just quickly sew this one. I'm going to put it back where it was. Now I'm going to sew these two pairs together. And again, I'm using my pin. But I am going to try to, before I put the pin in, I am going to try to line that up so I don't have to fidget with it at the machine. Put my pin in because we're looking at this side, but we're always going to be flipping so that we start with the folded edge is where we're always going to start our sewing. And I got my folded edges a little off, so I'm just fixing it. So remember, it's not your prom dress, it's just a Dresden plate. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back. Now I'm going to take the trio and put them on. Get my pin again. And what I do is I'm lining up the point, and once I have the point lined up, I put my fingers on it, and then just lay this down and put my pin in. And again, flipping it over to sew. Okay, I'm bringing the whole thing back again, and now I'm going to flip this over. And I don't need the pin now because I can't sew this wrong. I don't think, because there's no other side left to sew. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over. Let me put my pin away for the moment. And I'm just going to go along and finger press these open. I am going to press with my iron, but it's hard with a little 1/4 inch, 3-inch long seam to get the iron to press that open without you doing it finger press first. So you can see it's really, I don't know, it's simple sewing. It's kind of relaxing unless you're in a big rush, because that happens sometimes. And you can, do your cutting one time, put them all in a little bag. You can do your little tops one time. So, you can work on it in little sections without being overwhelmed with everything. And it's the same exact thing over and over. So now I've pressed those, the seams open with my fingers. And I'm just inching over to the next seam. I'm not going to come over 2 new seams at once. That's just asking for trouble. So when I put my iron down, it's going to go over the seam I just did, but it's nice and flat, so I don't have to worry about that being, messing that up. So I just move over far enough to get to the next seam. And watch your fingers. Now I will tell you, and we'll see in a minute, but you gotta be pretty similar with your 1/4 inch seam allowance for the circle to work. So I'm gonna flip this over because I want to make sure I don't have any creases. Isn't that pretty? And I don't know if I can't remember if I only finger press this or not, so I'm gonna just come around and make sure. I will say the little iron's pretty handy for that. But again, you could have 8-inch long blades. These are about 3.5. I just picked this size because I wanted to use that charm pack. And I should have 4 plates when I'm done, I believe. So I'm gonna show you how to turn it into a table runner next week. Okay. So it's looking like it's gonna line. Isn't it pretty? Rhonda, isn't it pretty? So now I just gotta sew the 2 seams. So that worked out pretty nicely. This hole is going to be covered with a fabric, a circle fabric. And this group comes with a circle. You wouldn't think that this little guy needed that big circle, but he does. Now I'm going to show you a secret way to do that. If you're using the Dresden ruler, generally when you buy a, here, let me put it, can you see? Oh, there, you can see it better there. Generally when you buy a Dresden ruler, in the instructions it'll tell you what circle to cut. But I only concern myself with that after it's done, and I want to make sure, for example, I want to make sure that I want that to overlap my fabric. And that really doesn't overlap by enough for me. So I'll get a bowl or something. I want this to be about a 1/2 inch over this fabric for the method that we're going to use for the circle. But you see what I mean? The circle's going to cover that area. So if they aren't all exactly the same, it's okay. And if you need, I better find that before I. Oh, for crying out loud! Don't touch anything more. Sorry, that must have been a horrible noise. Okay, don't touch anything else. Sorry about that. You don't want to be off too far, but if they're not all perfectly the same, and they're not, I have two right here that aren't the same, it's okay, because you just make the circle a little bit bigger. It will look just fine, because this unfinished edge is going to be covered by a finished edge circle. Okay? And we'll do that next week. So now we just have to go ahead and sew these two seams. So I just can flip them up this way, and I'm going to put a pin in them only just to hold them together. So I'll go ahead and line up. Whoop. So I'm just making sure my fold lines up and my line along here. I'll worry about this down here once I'm sewing. And I'll go ahead and do the other side. So sometimes if you're a little off in your circle, the last two seams, you might have to take a little bit bigger seam for it to lay flat. But just wait and see. As a rule, it works out all right. So I'm going to switch us over to sewing. So I've pinned my two sides, and I know I'm trying to keep my hands look gigantic, don't they? Like I got giant hands. And I'll just stop, just like I always do with any sewing that we're lining things up. Here we go. And I'm just gonna flip over to the other side. Okay, giving me trouble. Last one, giving me trouble. There we go. And I just wait till I get started. I know I've got my folds lined up. Now I'll just come and now I'll line up along this edge. Don't leave your pins on your machine to fall down into your machine somewhere. Okay, so let me just flip back over to the work table. And I got to press open those last two seams. This is really pretty. So quiet when I'm doing that. And of course, the old iron. Okay, where is it? Oh, it's right there. Almost couldn't see it. Now, when you have this circle on your big ironing board, or your ironing station, mine's a little small, you want to get it nice and flat as you can, and then just press it, press it, press it, and then leave it to cool off. Don't move it. Don't fiddle with it. Just leave it to cool off. And it might not be perfectly flat. It'll be pretty close. You just don't want to iron in like a big crease. So if you're wavy this way, you're going to just take one and just take a little bit more seam allowance, and then try it again, and then if it's still wavy, come over to another spot and take a little more seam allowance, and if it's still, make sure you didn't put in too many blades. That would be the first thing. But you, and depending on what size you do, you could have this issue. So just make sure that if it's wavy, it doesn't need to have a whole blade taken out. And if it does, take it out. You know, just take out the blade and sew back the other two together. But if you just got a little wave, and it's bothering you like it's making a crease, then just take a little more seam allowance, lay it down again, then come over to the other side if you need to, then take a little more seam allowance, lay it down again. Generally that would be enough, but if you need to do more, come to the other side. But if you start going to like 4 sides, chances are, if it's small blades, you got too many blades in. If it's bigger blades, it's a little different. You can take a little more in. Okay? So there we are. There's our Dresden plate, and this size is, let me put this where it belongs. This makes a, it's an 11, oh yeah, let me put it here so you can see it. It is from tip to tip, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is obviously not going to be by itself, though it could be. So if you're making a block, you would probably have, so this is 11, 12, 13. So you might have a 13, 12, depends how much extra you want out here. You could go 14, cut 14, and you could easily have a good couple inches of space on each side, and it would look just fine. Okay, so there's our Dresden plate, and again, if you don't have dies and die cutting, you can get acrylic, and generally it'll say right on it, Dresden plate. I have one I couldn't put my hands on, so it's got to be down in the cupboard that I have to scrounge around in. But it's going to look, this is pretty much the same thing. I'm trying to think of what a dock I can put this on so you can see it. Or maybe I need something light. Hold on a second. Oh, there you go. There we go. So again, depending on your fabric, so let me take this fabric. So there's lines across here, you can't really see them. So you'll have that edge at the top, and then this one's about it's about on the 5-inch line. There's lines along here. So anytime you get a Dresden template, it generally runs up to like 8 inches, so 8 inches wide. That would be like a really, really big Dresden. So you have all those sizes. So it's not like you're buying the rule and you can only do one thing. You can go down to little tiny ones, like this size. This is a 3-inch one. Okay? But make sure it doesn't come to a point. You want it to be like that. Okay? And sometimes you can even be further down. You see how wide this is so this is going the same way. And it is exactly the same size, but it's moved down so that this is wider. It's much easier when it's smaller if this is wider. You don't want to come to a point, because then you would run into a problem with the circle part. Okay, I got to put my paper back, or I won't have my notes. Okay, so thanks, Rhonda. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. And anyone else that didn't chat, thanks to everyone that's hanging out. And like I said, next week, because this isn't done yet, it still has to have a circle, but it doesn't have the circle until the Dresden plate is sewn down to a background in this particular case. So that's what I'll do next week. So if you want to sew along with me, do your Dresden plate during the week. And then you can see how this works. We have to put this onto a background fabric and do our little circle. And the circle can be the background color. It can be, you know, one of these colors. So you can almost see how much nicer it looks already because you don't see all that. So you can do a color in there. You can do different colors. You can do whatever your background is out here. You can do whatever you want. So that's it for tonight. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. I go for my second shot on Saturday, so I'm going to do a Saturday sew along. Not this Saturday because I have to have my shot right during that time, but the following Saturday. So today is the 15th, 16th, 17th, 17th Saturday. So the 24th. But I'll post in Facebook ahead of time. But we will do a Saturday sew along, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, unless the shot gives me some kind of reaction. But I think it'll be just fine. So thanks again for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.